Fantastic. Cool. All right. Well, welcome if you just joined us. We're switching across to our next topic, which is our headline event for today. We're super honored and excited to have none other than the award-winning film producer and director, Judy Irving, with us. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. You look great. You sound great. Wonderful.
Thank you.
So I'm a Mickaboo volunteer. My name's Sarah Lemarié. Pam did remind me I need to introduce myself as well. So hello and welcome to everyone who's joined. We're going to start the session. Judy and I were trying to figure out how we should kick off today, but we thought, obviously we'd love to play one of Judy's entire films, but we don't have the time for that. So we thought perhaps instead we'd play a short 5-minute piece, which is a music video Judy directed. Judy, would you like to introduce it briefly?
Sure. This is a sort of an experimental music video, and it's called Within You, Without You, which is a wonderful song by George Harrison. And it includes footage that I shot all around Telegraph Hill, up on top of the hill, Pioneer Park, and also in our backyard, and also in our house. So you will see within this music video, little Parker Bird, who is one of our rescue parrots. He does a little sachet dance across the floor. This is partly why we want to show this music video, but also Mark sings the vocals. Mark Bittner and his sister harmonizes with him. So enjoy.
Wonderful. Coming up on your screens now, and you might spot some other familiar characters if you're familiar with Judy's work.
Yes, Tupelo is in it too.
All right, here we go.
Talking about the space between us all
and the people who hide themselves behind a wall
of illusion,
never glimpse a truth.
Then it's far too late when they pass away. Talking about the love we all could share.
When we find it, to try our best to hold it there.
With our love, we could save the world if they only knew. Try to realize it's all within yourself. No one else can make you change. And to see you're really only very small, and life goes on within you and without you. About the love that's gone so cold,
and the people who
waiting there. And the time will come when you see we're all one, and life flows on within you and without you.
Wonderful. I recognized a few other birds in there, including Morrow from Pelican Dreams. And I've never seen a bird jousting with itself using cigarette butts before. I don't know how you to capture that.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that either, but I was on my way to work from where we live, and this bird did it day after day. So I finally just brought my camera and tripod up there and filmed it.
It's a fantastic capture. Wonderful. Well, I have to admit, I feel a bit like a kid in a candy store right now, because this is all my favorite topics kind of rolled into one conversation. So we're hoping to talk a little bit about, of course, about the famous film, The Wild Parrots of Telegraph Hill, and of course about some of your more recent work, your upcoming projects, and then a little bit about your birds. And I kind of want to loop and start by just talking about one bird who isn't with you anymore, but this is to give you your Mickaboo credentials and prove that Judy's a serious bird person. If you hadn't worked that out already, then a little bit of backstory. I think this was your first bird, is that right, Judy? Sweetheart was
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm gonna share a little photograph here because I think these pictures are just too cute not to share a few photographs. Judy was kind enough to send some over. So let's see if I can get them up on the screen. This is Sweetheart. Tell us about Sweetheart for a minute.
Yes, that's my little Sweetheart. I hadn't had a pet for a long time. I hadn't had a pet since I was a kid living at home. And I wanted to get a bird, but I didn't know what kind of bird to get. And someone said, oh, don't start with a big parrot, start with a cockatiel. So long story short, I went to the bird store on the way to Sonoma. I think it was called World of Birds. And on Independence Day in 1989, I bought little Sweetheart. And she was with us, me and us, for 22 years. And she's a sweetheart. What can I say? So she overlapped with the two rescue conures that we have now, Parker and Big Bird. She overlapped for a few years with them. And I still miss her.
Yeah. And you used to take her with you to your office regularly, is that right?
Yes, I brought her to the office in a little traveling cage over the hill. And then I also brought her to the Canessa Gallery, which is run by a friend of ours. I wanted to pose her in front of this beautiful picture. There it is. It was a photograph taken by Julie Jaycox, and she had a photo show up at the gallery. And there's Sweetheart posing in front of this wonderful plant that looks almost 3D.
Great.
Sweetheart got a kick out of going to the gallery, and everybody got a kick out of seeing her there too.
I bet they did. That was beautiful. Thanks for sharing those pictures. So there you go, Cockatiel team. Judy is one of your gang. So fantastic. Cool. So maybe we should start by talking a little bit about the famous film, one of the top 25 grossing theatrical documentaries of all time, Wild Parrots of Telegraph Hill. I know you've talked about this film a lot, and I would imagine in a group such as our Mickaboo community, many of you have seen it, but it may have been some time since you've seen it, and you may not have heard as much of the backstory about how it came to be and how it was filmed, how it was put together. I was kind of curious, Judy, to ask you a little bit about some of the making of pieces in terms of how long it took you to make the films. I think a lot of people might not realize, you might imagine, oh, you could film all that in a summer, but it's a lot more than that. And then maybe some of the shots in it that you're proudest of, and some of the shots that were the hardest to get. Maybe.
The whole project took about 4.5 years, although it looks like it just ran through the camera and it was finished. That's what it's supposed to look like at the end. It started because 2 friends of mine told me I should make a film about this guy who feeds the parrots. And when the second friend told me, I thought, well, I'd better follow up on that. And so I did, and ended up making the movie and having my life changed in the process. But I think in terms of the shots that I'm proudest of, I don't know that I'm proudest of them, but the hardest shots to get in that movie were the flying shots, because those birds fly so fast and they're so random, that you never know which way they're going to turn, or whether they're going to do a quick 180 and then you're left over here and they've already gone. So the few flying shots that I got in the movie, I'm really proud of, because it was so hard to get them, and because I missed so many good shots. You get when you're a documentary filmmaker, you have to be happy with a psychic exposure sometimes, where you saw it, but you didn't film it. So I have a lot of psychic exposures, but they're only in my head. I didn't get it on film.
Right. You brought them there in other ways. There are some incredible ones. There's a shot with the blue angels flying, and you managed to get the parrots flying right across in front of them at the same time. You make it look like it was all just set up perfectly for you, but I imagine that took some doing.
That actually was the second year that I filmed the blue angels and the parrots, and all those shots of the parrots flying around freaking out, they were freaking out because of the blue angels. I didn't use any shots. I didn't fake it at all. They're disturbed by the blue angels. But the first year that I filmed them, I did not get a shot. I call it the money shot, where you have the blue angels and the parrots in the same shot. So Mark had already moved away from the hill, and I wasn't living there. We were able to get on somebody's balcony for the second year, and I set up, and I just tried and tried and tried, and then finally this plane was coming toward me, and the flock was freaking out sort of behind it, and I got about, I think it really only lasts about 6 seconds or 10 seconds where they're all in the shot together, but it made the sequence. It told you, yes, this is for real.
Yeah, and it makes for an amazing part of the film. That's cool. For everybody watching, I see we've got some comments in the chat window already. If you have questions for Judy, or if you have comments or reactions to the topics we're discussing today, feel free to put them in the chat window. Pam's going to be keeping an eye on the chat and catching any questions to make sure that when we get to the live Q&A at the end, we can get your questions to Judy. So feel free to think about your questions as we go. We'll have some time for questions at the end. Pam, keep me right on time. In fact, let me make sure I've got my Pam channel open so I can see what Pam's telling me as well. Fantastic. So so the Blue Angel shot is pretty amazing. And you said that was the second year that you were filming. How many years were you filming in total to make the film?
Well, the whole thing took 4.5 years. And most of those years I was shooting and editing at the same time, shooting, logging, and editing. Toward the end, it was mostly editing, of course, and then shooting pickups. Oh, I need a wide shot of this, or I need that establishing shot, whatever. So the shooting went down as the years went by, and the editing kept pretty steady. And I did a rough cut screening at the Corrette Auditorium in San Francisco in the main library, and almost 200 people came. It was filled, and I had people fill out questionnaires, very simple questionnaire, like, what did you like? What did you dislike? What was confusing? What would you cut? What would you add? That kind of thing. And I had something like 192 responses, which really told me what the general audience was seeing and feeling and learning and confused by. So I used those responses to do my final edit. Because when you make a movie that's expensive, it takes a while. And I shot the whole thing on film, which was super expensive. You want it to last and you want it to be good because it costs so much, and you want it to work for a general audience. And so I'm a real believer in these rough cut screenings. It took a whole year after that rough cut screening to come up with the final what we call picture lock, where it was done and the music could be composed. So yeah, it's a long process, but I really love it.
Right. And how did your expectations evolve when you started out and you came to meet this guy on the hill who was feeding the parrots? What did you think you might be making versus where you ended up?
Oh yeah, well when I first met Mark, I thought, well, it's hard to jump into a film project with both feet and say, yes, I'm going to make a feature documentary and it's going to be a big deal and it's going to take a long time. I usually tiptoe in and I say, oh, this is just a hobby film, and let's do just a short little film for kids, maybe 20 minutes. That's how I conceived of it at the beginning, because it did seem like a children's story. It was magical, and it was about birds and a person and their relationship. And so I got a class from one of the creative schools in the mission, Synergy School, and they came and they were going to be the kids in this movie. And we had a fairly big crew. It was all nerve-wracking as hell because the kids kept looking at the camera. The parrots didn't fly in when they were supposed to. Of course, you can't ask them to. And it was kind of a disaster. It didn't end up happening at all. But what I realized during that time was that Mark was a really, really good storyteller. He was telling stories to the kids. And I started realizing that this could be a full-length portrait documentary of him and his relationship to the birds. So that's what it ended up being.
Right. That's what it became.
Mm-hmm. And you're very familiar with it, aren't you, Sarah?
Well, only a little bit. Yeah, maybe this is where we I have more questions I want to ask you, Judy, about the film itself.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay.
So many things I want to talk about, but I have to also keep an eye on the time so that we don't sit too long in any one place. Yeah, I have been incredibly honored. If you told me 2 years ago this is what I would have been doing this last year, I don't think I would have believed you. I heard through Mark that Judy was working on remastering the film. If you've tried to watch it recently, you might have discovered it's not that easy to find. The distribution is a little limited right now because, as Judy said, it was filmed on 16mm film. So it's not available in HD right now. But Judy, you started this project, this effort to get it remastered in HD something like 3 years ago, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I realized that if we just left it as a 16mm transfer to video, like to Beta SP or Betacam, it would eventually die because standard definition is not what people watch anymore. And so I started poking around and trying to figure out how we could scan the film, scan the negative, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences stepped up to the plate, and they donated a scan. They work with a certain lab that they do this a lot with films that were shot on actual film negative. And that lab scanned every frame of the 16mm in 4K. So it's going to be spectacular when this remastered version is finished. And I have to say, it wouldn't have been finished in early 2022, which is our target date, if it weren't for Sarah, who has helped tremendously as a volunteer tech expert and dustbuster and handholder. And really, I mean, you've really, really been the underpinning of the whole project. It's fantastic. So why don't you talk a little bit about what the process is?
Oh my goodness. Judy's talking me up here a lot, but I really only got involved in one of the final stages. There was a lot of early work after the scan was done. Judy's working with a colorist, Gary Coates, who had already been working with her on preparing the scan as it comes in raw. But then frame by frame, painstakingly, once the scan is completed, on every single frame, inevitably, because it's real film, there's dust, there are hairs and pieces of dust and specks and small bits and big bits. And there's just no easy way to clean that up other than to take a mix of the latest technology solutions, which can help some of the way. But then also the manual work of reviewing and just hand eliminating pieces of dust on every single frame of all 5 reels. So that was where Judy really hit a hurdle, because Judy's one person with one pair of hands, and it's an incredible amount of content to work through. So I offered to help, thinking that, maybe I would just, click on some dust and it would be done fairly easily. I have learned so much. I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, I'm not a film expert. I'm just someone with a computer and a lot of enthusiasm. But Judy has taught me an incredible amount, and I've learned a huge amount from her and Gary about this process, about film production in general. It's been a real thrill, an honor, and a great experience. And now it's getting close to the end. It really is going to be, I think we've got probably another 4 to 6 weeks before we hand it off to Gary for the final color grading, and then it goes for packaging. So pretty exciting time. And then it will be back out there, bigger, brighter, and hopefully not louder. And
the colors really pop. It's gonna look spectacular.
It does look amazing, I have to say. I mean, not too much blowing our own trumpet, I think. I mean, I was really surprised when I saw the original scans. It was a little bit into the project working with Judy that I saw the original scans that she and Gary had been framing and working with to even start dust busting. And my jaw fell to the floor, because you would think someone had stomped all over them. There was just so much to clean up. But it's really going to be a thrill to see it up there in 4K. So it's going to be very exciting. Okay, so let's try and stay on time and talk a little bit about some of your newer projects, your more latest work, before we talk a little bit about birds again, and specifically your birds. I wanted to ask you about the most recent project that you still have in the pipeline, which is called Refuge. Would you tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now and the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, this is it's another feature documentary called Refuge, and it's about swimming in San Francisco Bay. This is something I've been doing since 1984, year round. It really helps keep me sane, and I just started getting curious about why other folks swim in the bay, and I started discovering some really dramatic stories of disability and grief and stress and disease, and I mean all kinds of stories that are in the movie now. So I shot most of it with members of the South End Rowing Club. I don't know if locals are familiar with the Dolphin Club and the South End Rowing Club. They're both down by Hyde Street Pier in San Francisco, right on Aquatic Park. And I shot most of it in 2019 before the pandemic hit. So that was great because nobody was wearing masks. And then I had to take a little bit of a production pause, but I kept logging and editing through the pandemic and filming creatures like harbor seals and sea lions, these marine mammals that we swim with, because they don't wear masks. I don't want anybody to have a mask in the movie when it's done because I don't want it to be dated. I always try to make my movies sort of timeless, you know, so that they last and last. And so far it's worked. So that's the one that I'm working on now. There's a diversity of swimmers and a series of adversities that these folks are getting over or becoming resilient to, which is to me really inspiring. And all but one of them are members of the South End Rowing Club, which is also it's rowing, swimming, handball, and running. So you folks should check it out if you live in San Francisco or nearby. It's a great place to be and to get back to nature. That's the subtext. Get back to nature. Let's get away from these screens, all these Zoom. Just kidding. Let's do something real. It's not virtual. It tends to help focus your attention on the real thing, which can't be bad. And it can't be bad for the planet either to have people focusing on what's real instead of what's virtual.
Absolutely. I love this environmental theme in all of your work. I feel bad because here we are talking about getting away from screens, and I've dragged you into a Zoom session to talk to us all. Judy might be the last person in Silicon Valley that doesn't have a cell phone, and it's impressive. We'll get a hold of you. So I have to tip my hat to your efforts to stay committed to your principles there.
Well, but there's an irony there too, and a sort of hypocrisy, because I make movies and everybody sees the movies on a screen, right? So I can't get away from them, and I edit the movies on a screen. So I don't know. The whole thing is kind of a mishmash. But the point is that there's a natural world out there. There's a real world, and there are animals and other species, and we're not the only ones that live here on the planet. And, you know, all of that natural world really needs attention at this point.
It's so true. I mean, I've learned a lot about birds through my work with Mickaboo, but just in casual conversation with Judy, I've learned about all kinds of other species I was completely oblivious to, including bizarre fish. I'm not gonna.
Green fin midshipmen.
Midshipmen, yeah.
Green fin midshipmen, they make this wonderful tonal noise, the males do, that when they're calling out for the females. and it's a G sharp. Anyway, we've used that sound from these fish, which hang out along Muni Pier and the breakwater in an aquatic park, and they hang out on other places too, like in Alameda at Crab Cove. But it's sort of like,
And you can hear them when you're in the water swimming, right?
it just goes on and on and on.
Right?
Yeah.
Drone, like a really deep drone.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. So how often do you go cold water swimming? What's your...
Well, right now I'm only going about twice a week. I have gone more often than that, but during the pandemic, it was kind of hard because they closed the South End Club and we only had access to these little dribbly warm showers outside. And we were still outside in the cold during the winter. So I kind of went down to once a week during the pandemic, during the worst part of the pandemic, but now I'm back up to twice a week.
But all through winter, you go
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, year round.
Right. And no wetsuits. You're not, you just step into the water and...
Well, it's always cold, no matter what. It's always cold, but you do get used to it. And it feels fantastic afterwards.
Maybe that can be in the next Mickaboo social, is a cold water swimming session. See how many people we get to show up to that. You have inspired me to swim more. So it's
and there is one shot of the parrots in Cold Refuge. You'll have to check out the movie and see which shot it is.
Yeah, keep an eye out for it.
Actually, Sarah helped me extract an HD version of that shot from the 4K, didn't you, Sarah?
I did. We found the section you were looking for and
Right.
it out for you. Yes. Yeah, I'm always on the lookout for side projects. So let's switch from one passion of yours to another passion of yours. When we were brainstorming what we wanted to try and talk about, we did have kind of a beautiful tie together because we were going to have Megan talking about living with disabled birds. Unfortunately, Megan's not here today. Get well soon, Megan. But we have Judy who can talk about that, and Parker is another one of Judy's passions. You're really enthusing about him to me yesterday. So I have some pictures of Parker, and we saw Parker using his little sachet across the floor in your video. He's really adorable. Why don't you maybe tell us a little bit about how Parker and Big Bird came to live with you whilst I get some pictures of Parker up on the screen.
Okay, well, the first bird who came to live with us was Big Bird, who had smashed into a plexiglass windbreak and knocked herself out. So let's see. Oh yeah.
Okay.
And then Parker came to live with us a year later when Mark was riding his bicycle along Battery Street and saw somebody putting a box down over something, and he thought, oh, that's a parrot. He went up to the person and said, what's under the box? And they said, a parrot. And he said, I'll take it. So he brought Parker home. Parker wasn't named yet, but it's named after Charlie Parker. And I really didn't want another bird. We already had a cat named Ebony, and we had to keep Parker and Big Bird away from Ebony. And Mark said, well, Parker will either get better or die, because Parker had the head tilt and the neurological damage from what we now know is the rat poison. Now here's Parker and Big Bird. Parker is a little bit plucked. Big Bird is too enthusiastic about preening Parker sometimes. So preen's a little bit extra. But these two birds have lived with us for about 20 years. Parker 19, Big Bird 20, but they're the same age. They were born the same year. And they get along. They squabble, as anybody who has conures knows. They squabble and then they make up immediately, and then they squabble again, and it goes on and on all day long like that. But they're really, they need each other. I think they would be very lonely if they were on their own. think it's really a great idea that you at Mickaboo try to pair up these birds, because they're flock animals. They're used to being with each other, and they need at least one other companion.
Yeah, they really thrive if they have the company of another bird. Even if they're okay with people, it's still so much more enriching for them if they have another bird they can be with in during the same space. Assuming that they get along, obviously they have to make that choice. And that's a very personal decision for them. So we don't get to decide who buddies up with who, but when it works out, it's really great for them.
Yeah.
What's it like living with Parker? Why do you have such a soft spot for him?
Well, you know, anybody who has a bird for more than a year figures out the personality of the bird. And, you know, there they are. Parker is, to me, sort of a guru. He's a kind, quiet bird, and he's wise. And Big Bird is more like a ditz. Big Bird is reactive. Parker doesn't necessarily react. Parker is a little weaker than Big Bird, but when he wants to kick ass, he can, and he does, but he doesn't often do it. You know, I don't know. I just respect Parker so much, and I hadn't lived with a disabled animal or person or anything before, and I've just come to understand that the disability is part of who they are, and it's often what makes them incredibly endearing.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned so much from this bird, and I don't know, I just adore him. I can't believe that I didn't want him to stay when he first came. But he didn't die, and he didn't get all the way better, but he got a lot better. He started out with the sort of the figure 8 head tilt, and gradually was able to sit up and not have that problem. And then I remember a moment when he started to preen himself. And then I remember another moment years later, when he was stable enough to start preening Big Bird. And so he has made progress, and we've put up this manzanita branch, and we encourage him to climb up the branch to get a little piece of millet, which he can do. It's kind of amazing, even though he's a little bit of a stumble bum. You saw him in the music video. He kind of has his own little gait as he walks along.
Yeah, he kind of wobbles along the floor.
Kind of wobbles, but I just adore this bird. I really do. And we lie together on the bed morning and night. It's our little meditation time.
Yeah.
I lie down, and they sit right here on me. And they like it, and I like it. And Mark sometimes plays music. He plays guitar. The birds love that. And sometimes Mark comes over and pokes at them and stuff, because he's more active in how he reacts to the birds. He wants them to understand that they're conures, and conures are feisty birds. He gets feisty with them, whereas I sort of get meditative with them or whatever.
So you have a regular routine every day with your time with them?
Yeah, morning and night. I mean, pretty much after breakfast, I lie down and they sit on me for a while, and sometimes Parker even takes a little nap, which I just love, that he's calm enough and trusting enough to close his eyes and take a nap. And Big Bird is more hyper. Sometimes I make jokes that she's got ADHD, and she's OCD, and she kind of can't sit still for very long. So she's off chewing a piece of quilt that we've consigned to the birds, or doing something else. Every now and then she'll calm down and be a little bit more quiet. But I love that time with them because it's a time to just actually look at them and study them and think about them and slow down, and not have all this to-do list running through my head all the time.
Is it particularly hard or difficult catering for disabled birds? Have you had to make big concessions to your time or their setup to handle the fact that they're not completely normal mobile birds?
Well, neither one of them. Big Bird got a little bit of a problem in one of her eyes when she smashed into that windbreak. And initially we thought that she couldn't see too well out of it, but now we realize she can see okay. It's just all sort of dark. Mm-hmm. She can fly around. She flies around the house. And Parker cannot fly. Parker has learned that he can't fly, even though he's not clipped. He'll hang on to a branch on top of the cage and flap and flap and flap and do his exercises that way. But he has kind of learned on his own what he can do and can't do. I instead of an actual, like a perch, a branch or something, I just take the ladder, which goes up to the cage, hold it horizontally, and they both know to step onto it. And I can carry them around to one room or another. And it's nice because it's got a little platform area basically for Parker to balance on.
Perfect. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there have been a few concessions, but not, they live their lives and make choices about what they do, what they want to do, and how they want to live. We all live together. Yeah.
That's wonderful. A lot of birds will do really well if you just have a few flat platforms, or ladders are fantastic for that, or seagrass hammocks. A lot of birds will get around just fine having a few flat things to rest on or to be moved around on if they're not comfortable on hands. Yeah, I think it's a great showcase regarding considering living with disabled birds. Mickaboo has lots of birds which aren't 100%, maybe they lost a wing or they lost a leg, or they have foot or leg problems, or arthritis through old age. And sometimes they make the best companion birds because they're not going to fly all over your house, and they're a little bit easier to manage and often a lot more used to being handled by people. So wonderful. Okay, I'm looking at,
and they also have, they have no self-pity. They just move on with their lives. I mean, there's so many lessons that you can learn from a disabled bird. Parker just lives his life. He's got a lot of self-respect, and he makes decisions about what he wants to do. He kind of knows what he can't do. But you don't get the feeling that he's feeling sorry for himself. He's not.
About it. No, he's just getting on with being a bird. We've seen that time and again with birds. We usually feel terrible for them, like, oh, poor bird, he lost a wing. Birds need their wings. And we are projecting all this sorrow. And just being a parrot, they don't care. And they still have the same personality and the same feistiness that they had before. So it's kind of a great thing to point out. So if we can get past the fact that happened to them, and they're over whatever medical recovery was involved, they're often still a very fun bird to have around. We are getting a lot of questions, so I think we should probably take some of those.
Sure.
Get through a lot of them. So this could cover anything over your films and your projects to living with birds. Let's see if we scroll back a little bit. One question going back to the Well Parrots film. Was there anything that you might have regretted leaving on the cutting room floor?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Well, there are a lot of extras on the DVD. And nobody looks at DVDs anymore, but there they are. And a lot of them are online too on my Vimeo channel. Those little sequences are mini films that I kind of wish I could have included in the movie. One, for instance, is a little extra story about Theo, a parakeet, a budgie, who flew with the flock, and actually led the flock a lot of times. It was an amazing bird. So there's a little story about Theo that didn't end up in the movie. Let's see, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else that I was just dying to include. One thing that I checked when I did the rough cut screening was, I checked with the audience, should the film end with the last feeding, when Mark feeds them for the last time and they fly away, or should it end with this epilogue that I had added, a rough version of the epilogue at the time of the screening, where you find out about Connor and what happened to Connor, and then what happened with me and Mark. And it was overwhelming that folks wanted the epilogue to be included. They wanted those stories to be tied up. There is a whole extra called Homage to Connor, about, we found out that, he had been dropped by that hawk. He was dead, but he hadn't been eaten. And a neighbor found him and buried him, gave him a proper burial on Telegraph Hill. So that is like a postscript to the story of Connor that I would have loved to have included, but I didn't actually find out about it until several years after the film was finished.
Wow.
Yeah.
All the characters in the film, so they all have their own story arcs.
Mm-hmm.
We have more questions. Where will the restored version be available?
That is a good question. There's a wonderful distributor in Sausalito called Roco Films, and they are going to take it on as a classic legacy movie, and they're going to re-release it. They have good connections with Netflix, with iTunes, with all your basic suspects in the streaming world. So I'm not exactly sure where it will be, but I really have faith in Roco Films to get it out there in a big way. And we'll let you know. We'll totally be in touch via Sarah with
Stay tuned. Yes, well, a lot more to say about that the moment that we have more details.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Little comment from Linda about the plainfish midshipman. That John McCosker of the CA Academy of Sciences was helpful in determining the cause of the humming. Houseboats, the residents of houseboats in Sausalito were being driven crazy by the nightly humming, and then when they figured out the cause, everyone had a good laugh. It was just a bunch of overexcited fish.
Right.
Linda asks, how did Parker learn to set up and stop making those figure-of-8 head wobbles? Did you do some kind of physiotherapy with him, or? No,
he just he's stabilized on his own.
Right.
Yeah, he just over time he got better stability, and he you could just tell he was more settled in his body. I don't know what happened with the toxins that were in his body. I don't know how that works exactly, but it felt like some of it maybe got less, he was reacting less to his problems.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just a matter of time.
It's motor skill deficiencies, so the brain can rewire itself a little bit. It's essentially parts of the brain have been fried by neurotoxins, so over time the brain figures out ways to kind of try and rewire itself a little bit. And also muscle strength, as he is moving around, he's getting a little bit of more core strength.
Right. I do like to make him walk across the floor sometimes, like he did in the music video, because it requires him to exercise, you know.
Yeah,
Before-
get your birds
Yeah.
moving. No perch potatoes around here, definitely. Someone is asking, is there any chance that Parker and Big Bird would mate and raise a baby?
No, no, that
No. No.
well, over the years, occasionally Big Bird would sort of get interested, but Parker has never had any interest at all. Let's put it that way. So
Yeah.
that's good, because we do not want to be conure breeders. That was not part of the plan, and so we're kind of glad that the disability helped us in that way.
Yeah, if anyone needs a conure, we've got plenty, so we don't need to make any more. And I think it's worth saying that we do see a lot of issues with a lot of the captive birds that we rehome, ringnecks and African greys and other species, where there are even other conures where there are a lot of hormone problems with hormonal behavior and hormonal plucking, and having to go to the vet for lupron shots because of that every year. And what we see with the San Francisco wild conures that we end up rescuing and taking in, if they do stabilize and we have them in foster homes, we don't see the same hormonal problems in those birds at anything like the same rate. So things I don't have to worry about, even though we pair them up to be friends. They really, we don't see any issues with mating behaviors or egg laying or nesting behaviors or hormonal plucking, which I think is perhaps just because they have that chance to live as they were meant to, and it hasn't been as much of an issue. So that's one of the positives of taking on one of them versus other types of parrot species.
Mm-hmm.
Someone commented asking if Parker was on any medications.
No, no medication.
Yeah, most of our wild conures are not on medications. They might be on pain medications short term if they had an injury, but long term.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Pam, am I missing any questions? Scrolling back, take a look in the chat.
There was a comment from Steve about how about rocking back and forth. His pet, a Senegal, does that occasionally. I think the question is about whether that's a normal behavior or indicative of something wrong.
Wow. I don't understand. Is that a question or?
What about rocking back and forth? But we were talking about stopping making those head wobbles when Parker was going through his recovery.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be depending on whether it's side to side or back and forth or what it looks like. It could be anything from dancing to hormonal activity. So we might have to see some clips of a specific Senegal move. Oh, from side to side. Well, that could just be dancing or playing.
Yeah. That could be a dance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with Parker, it was, you could tell that he kind of couldn't control his head.
Right.
And with the dancing or rhythmic, you can probably see that it's meant to be.
Yeah, we see a lot of, we call it the head tilt or being ataxic when the conures suffer from bromethylin poisoning. They lose a lot of their motor skills, and so they can't sit themselves upright. And the classic head tilt that we see is one of the common physical indicators that might be what they're struggling with. There's no test, unfortunately, unless they pass away. So we can't sort of diagnose them easily, but there's a very common set of physical behaviors we see. Oh, Mark says maybe displaying if your Senegal is dancing from side to side. Well, possibly. Thank you, Mark, for joining. We'll have Mark on tomorrow. We're not hiding him deliberately today. Mark's got his own session tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So if you want to hear Mark's take on all things parrots and beyond, then that will be happening tomorrow. We've got Mark in his own separate session because we thought there might be a lot of questions, and both Mark and Judy have their own set of projects, which I think we wanted to give them ample time to talk about. Okay, cool. Steve, oh, you've only had your tentacle for 4 months. and he eats a lot. Parrots will eat as much as you give them. We'd be happy to chat with you if you're looking for tips. Someone says, are you still site? I'm not sure if there's a typo in that. Something about the Telegraph Hill conures at the Embarcadero. Yes, that is where they roost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of them still roost there in the tall poplar trees. In fact, it's the most reliable place that you can see them. If you go there before dusk, right around sunset, if you have out of town visitors, just go down to Ferry Park and take a listen.
Yeah, follow the noise.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you seen them there recently, Judy? Have you gone down to see them in a while?
Yeah, I have. When during the nesting season, it's mostly the young ones that aren't paired up and that aren't nesting that sleep there. And then the pairs are all in these, holes in trees throughout the city. But then once the babies come out, the flock gets bigger and there's all kinds of birds sleeping down there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot more these days. There's something like 200 to 220 odd birds. I think we did a count in January. I think hopefully we can do another one. Gosh, next month now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Golden Gate Audubon do a count as well.
Right.
Well, the best times to count them is before they all take off. You can just go to those poplar trees and snap some pictures quickly, and then that gives you the chance to try and get them all together. But yeah, follow the sound. You can't miss them. Great. Someone's asking if this talk will be available later. Most likely we will review with Judy just to see if there's anything she wants to tweak or update. And we played a video at the start, so we'll discuss how we're going to edit all of that, and then we'll definitely get something online. Great. Any other questions for Judy? Well, we're pretty much hitting time, so yeah. Managed to stay on track. Judy, thank you so much for making time to hang out with us today.
You, Sarah.
It's been really fun hanging out with you. And yeah, stay tuned because we'll have hopefully some big news coming up in just a month or two about getting the 4K version of the Wild Parrots film out there for everyone to enjoy. Bigger and brighter than ever. Wonderful. All right, thanks everyone. That is our last feature event today. We will be starting again tomorrow, and I want to make sure I get my timings right. Pam, I think we have Mark Bittner at 1 o'clock, right? That's our first event tomorrow. Mark at 1 o'clock, and then
correct. And then we've got the Birds and iPad idea at 2 o'clock, followed by our Mickaboo Social Hour at 3 o'clock, wrapping up the week's festivities.
Yes, so that will be the end of our auction as well. So you can hang out with us and ooh and ah at all of your auction winnings. And if you didn't hang on for the second hour, then I could tell you, I've been helping list the auction items. There are still things I was seeing in Pam's showcase that I had completely missed, especially that gift basket, which looks phenomenal. I've added like 5 more things to my watch list now. So between all the carriers, the artworks, the gift basket, and the multitude of toys, stock up because there's some absolute bargains in there. And then we'll be seeing how that all wraps up tomorrow. And hopefully we will hit our fundraising goal. We are
96.1% there. Our fundraising goal is 50,000. We are slightly over 48,000.
We're so close. 96.1. All right, let's get it up to 100 in time for tomorrow's social celebration.
Indeed.
Fun.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for your support and your attention. It's been a fun Saturday. Look forward to seeing everybody on Sunday with yet more interesting presentations and, of course, the end of the auction.
Fantastic. We'll see everyone tomorrow at 1 o'clock for our interview with Mark Bittner. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Bye, everyone.